Jesus stretched out his hand, touched him. We could miss the significance of that line in the gospel. Leprosy, as we know, was such a terrible disease. It would really eat at the flesh of the person. It was also contagious, and so for a person to be diagnosed with leprosy was to be diagnosed with a sentence of a very serious illness and also a sentence of removal from the community. A leper would often carry a bell and would be required to ring the bell or to make a lot of noise when they were coming into other people's areas, and they would call out, "Unclean, unclean." The people would avoid them. They were not only physically sick, but they suffered the great pain of being separated from their community and the loneliness of all of that. Jesus broke through that. We see in so many cases where Jesus healed people. He could heal people from a distance. Remember the children, the soldier's child, just a servant. Go home, they'll be well. But he did something different. He touched the man. He healed him. But the touch was important because physically he was healing him and also embracing him, loving him, showing God's concern. You may not be familiar with the name Vinicio Riva, but you may remember that very famous picture now of our Holy Father, Pope Francis. After one of his audiences, one of the things that they do at the papal audiences on Wednesdays is they bring the Pope and the sick together. And the Pope spends some time visiting the sick. And this man, Vinicio, had a disease, neurofibromatosis. And it's a very difficult disease because it had all kinds of boils on his skin, all over his body. Painful, unsightly boils. He suffered so much since his teenage years of being one who people avoid, who people say all kinds of things to. He said when people see him coming, they cross the street. His condition is not contagious, but it's very painful and isolating. And he said that when the Pope came down and saw him, and these are his own words, he said, "He embraced me without saying a word. I felt as though my heart was leaving my body." And then he said, he was completely silent, but sometimes you can say more when you say nothing. And he held him, he said, for a minute, but it felt like an eternity. He caressed my head and wounds. Then he drew me to him in a strong embrace, kissing my face. He thought his heart was going to explode from his chest. He said the Pope didn't know that my condition was not contagious, but in that embrace, he felt so loved by God. What a beautiful gift that was. The Pope could have nodded to him, acknowledged him, given him a blessing, all of which would have made this man's life. But he took the extra step of embracing him, holding him, kissing him, sharing in his pain and his suffering. And while the man was not physically healed, he was spiritually healed. To know that the vicar of Christ is representing Christ's own love to him in his painful and isolating condition. We're celebrating the last days of Christmas, but our whole faith is a faith of the Jesus doesn't save us from a distance. He comes to us up close. He touches us. He embraces us. He heals us. He took flesh and shared in our humanity so that we could share in his divinity. On Sunday, we celebrate the feast of the baptism of the Lord, and we see how Jesus entered the water, not as a sinner, but as one blessing the water of baptism for us. And we also realize always that we follow a Lord who shed his own blood out of love for us on the cross. We do not worship a distant, remote, uncaring God at all. He loves us. He embraces us. He saves us. And in our encounter with the Lord, as we receive the gift of his mercy, he also sends us. As you come to me and receive this great gift of the Eucharist, will you go and be my hands and feet and heart and love to every person you meet, especially those most in need of the healing touch of Jesus? May the Lord, who fills us with so many gifts and so much love, inspire us to serve others out of love for him.